Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I'm very glad to welcome you here today. Last year, Global Impact Conference explored the role of human-centric approach in achieving balanced economic growth. This year, we turn our attention to bridging the gaps in our economies and society. Together, via interactive sessions, we'll discuss topics that range from the environment to the future of work to improving mental health. The past year has been really challenging for the entire world. The two major crises facing humanity are COVID-19 and the climate emergency, and both provide reasons for concern and for the optimism. At the time of the Global Impact Conference last year, the vast majority of the global population did not yet have access to vaccine against coronavirus. Today, over 7.5 billion vaccines have been administered, and over 3 billion people are fully vaccinated. Our speakers today include many of the innovators who are finding opportunities for positive impact during the COVID pandemic. The second crisis facing humanity is the climate emergency. The past 5 years have been the hottest on record since 1850. The good news is that global leaders are taking action, as was seen at the recent COP26 conference. During this event in Glasgow, Rosatom participated in a series of events highlighting the integral role nuclear energy can play in decarbonization. 32 countries operate nuclear power plants, which account for 10% of world's energy and more than 1/4 of all low-carbon electricity. Nuclear power generation capacity will need to at least double over the next 3 decades if the world is to meet the Paris Agreement targets. The argument supporting nuclear power is simple. It is the only carbon-free energy source that can reliably deliver electricity day and night, any time of the year, to virtually anywhere in the world. Atomic energy is a great partner to renewables like wind power, in which Rosatom is also developing its expertise. Nuclear is also historically proven to be the safest source of energy for both the environment and for the human health. Even changes that are smaller than producing low-carbon energy are vital in bridging the gaps in our modern world. What the Global Impact Conference reveals is that you don't need to be a president or CEO to make a huge positive impact. Our expert speakers will clearly show that leadership is being democratized. The right combination of skills and ideas can change the world through many small steps. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, thank you for becoming part of our global impact community. We are just at the beginning of important endeavor aimed at creating innovative, shared responses for sustainable development.
There's no doubt we're witnessing something big in terms of the scale of transformation the world is going through. Is it possible to build a green future, or are we stuck in a crisis of confidence? What is the mission of today's leaders and those who will be addressing the challenges of the future? We have a great opportunity to find answers for these questions in the global dialogue titled Defining the Gaps: Responsible Businesses for Thriving Ecosystems, between the Director General of Rosatom Corporation, Alexey Likhachev, and journalist Safiko Shevardnadze.
В своем приветствии вы упомянули главное событие года по устойчивому развитию КОП-26, Форум очень сильно критикует. Говорят,
Alexey, in your welcome address, you mentioned COP26 as the most important event of ESG agenda, and the forum is criticized because people say, once again, it's de facto do as you please, no tough decisions. The G7 met, then G20 met. Guterres sounded really disappointed. He tweeted, I leave Rome with my hopes unfulfilled. And indeed, the impression is that the challenge is exponentially growing. The buzz is exponentially growing, while in decision-making, all we see is a plateau, a constant. Why so? Why is it always? Why it's always stops short of decisive measures? You know, the real decisive measures.
This is a very profound and complex question, Safiko. Thank you. Okay, let's start with our view of it. I believe that this is both bad and good. Well, this is a fact. Now, this is, well, good and bad. Well, it's bad because that's the fact. And we can see many words unsaid in the conclusions and incomplete decisions, so this has to be admitted. On the other hand, we can see some processes, both for G7 and G20 and COP26, since if we had read in all the newspapers that the forums have shown the victory of all the progressive humanity and we can just relax, this would have been even worse, because this would have been a patent lie. And secondly, we understand that humanity, as of today, doesn't have a consolidated position on solving the issues. There are many reasons to it. They are technological. We understand that the countries differ pretty much in terms of technological development. Another issue is a poor understanding of the challenge as such. Well, politicians differ, and we often see simplifications, well, I beg your pardon, even vulgar understanding of the environmental challenges. Well, sometimes this is, well, too simplistic or oversimplistic. And the third thing is the overall trust crisis everywhere in terms of people-to-people relationship, geopolitical or political relationships. So all these things are happening globally and then are working against developing common solutions in many areas, not only the ecology, but also the economic policy, for instance. If you look at the global trade and what is going on, well, if you look at, say, the last 10 years with the WTO and the World Customs Union, well, they're just walking away. They're walking away from the decisions and solutions as of year 2000 and early 2010. Well, the migration policy. Well, what kind of trust is there? What kind of looking for solutions? They're just shifting the burden to somebody else's shoulders. The political agenda globally. Well, I believe that now we are living through a very problematic time there. If you look at the time from 1940, for instance, well, this issue, so now it's in a cold situation, but it's quite threatening. So with this trust crisis and cooperation crisis, how can we in this environment come to terms at the environmental discussions? Well, everybody understands this. This is a problem, but there is some good news to it. A number of solutions were articulated at COP. They were signed. And the third important thing is that, well, maybe not legally, but at least politically, the parties have come closer after COP26. This is true for the formal part of it. We can see that more than 100 countries signed many declarations. Well, say the declarations on forests and green finance. Well, these are the groups of countries which are now determining the level of coal consumption, methane emissions levels. So we can see some results. They are there. But I don't think anybody expected a complete consensus or a solution of the problem at Glasgow. This problem, the way I see it, doesn't have a solution for the whole humankind.
So many thoughts about trust. But okay, we'll get back to it later. For now, let's dive into specifics. You once said that nuclear energy history is now divided into before and after COP26. Quite a big statement. What exactly...
Many things changed at the forum. Let me take a step back. The 2010s, so we remember 2011 from them. Fukushima and the decisions taken following it. The decisions to stop developing nuclear power by many countries. And this is quite dramatic. We can see there the elements of the use of nuclear energy. We can see the promotion of green technologies. We can see the strife between transnational companies and corporations to gain public support in some areas of energy. Well, the 2010th are the years when the world was kind of walking away from nuclear energy. At the COP meetings we had a few years ago, they kind of squeezed out from the playmaker pool the nuclear companies and the nuclear agenda. Well, I wouldn't say that this was a no handshaking policy, but for sure they were not, the first circle, so to say. I mean, those who were for the nuclear energy. So they were squeezed out of this first-tier circle, and they were not invited, and they were not discussed. So what happened before COP26? What is important there? We were quite active in this, Rosatom. We asked, and this was approved, we asked for the promotion of nuclear energy, our priceless, seriously, support for developing the green energy. So this nuclear energy started to be promoted by the IAEA, and the IAEA was promoting this. And well, Grossi, the Director General, organized the Vienna Club. This is a really interesting format. And about 10 leaders of the nuclear energy entered the U-scale from the US, the European EDF and Urenco and Rolls-Royce from the UK, now the European, CNNC from China, Kazatomprom from Kazakhstan, and us. And we agreed and coordinated our joint effort. And we went through our national delegations and through some events, and we brought the positive agenda to the conference. What is important? You're not just, supported like, okay, we can hear you, we are doing the right things. No, this is not exactly what happened. What really happened was a number of announcements from the countries who say that they cannot imagine the carbon transformation, they cannot envisage the development of the green energy without the role played by the nuclear energy. And, well, this is exactly the articulation, the spirit of the discussion, the official agenda of the countries, the events which were going on. So this was a kind of revolution. And I agree with you completely. It didn't happen in the big agenda or in the de jure issues like declarations and announcements. And we see a lot of flies in this ointment. Well, the strangest things which are happening in terms of this field would be the rejection of the European taxonomy of nuclear energy. So the big countries have decided this. Well, including Germany, where we have some issues, but still, well, I can hardly understand how the EU, having France with 70% of generation, and the Balkans, where I have more than half Finland, they're developing this, and Poland, they have approved a nuclear program. So how come they don't add nuclear energy as acceptable for the European energy balance? That's why I'm saying, going back to your first question, well, one of the reasons of the political failure of the COP is that as soon as you stop simplifying things and you start really estimating the proper, I'm talking about power generation now, the proper power balance for your country, for the EU, or globally, say balance 2060, well, you should replace coal there with some real generation. You should understand the cost of it, to build it and to operate it, and how it will depend on the fuel price, for instance, if this is gas generation. Well, now we are talking about electricity only, but apart from that we have transportation, we have industry, and their CO2 equivalent, the emissions of carbon, methane, and so on. Has anybody estimated this? Well, my take is that electricity makes about 30% of the greenhouse anthropogenic effect, and about 65 to 70% comes from the industry and transportation chains. Well, I didn't really expect any breakthrough from the Glasgow events. Well, any conference is usually a political.
If we were to simplify and describe the transfer to green energy as a process, what we're saying is that the first-echelon countries, they can afford it. They're rich countries. How about the low-income countries, though? They might be willing to transfer, but how can they manage? I mean, physically, as you were saying, countries are so politically, economically, technologically different. You know, when I come to think of it, I say, uh-oh, looks like all our efforts to change something, to make a difference, and the global warming are doomed to failure.
Okay, another step back. Well, in Russia, we have many century traditions which have brought us close to the EU in terms of business, and we are interwoven politically. And if we look at some other countries further away from us, some of them are much bigger than Russia. Well, here I'm talking about, say, China, India, and others, like Bangladesh and Pakistan. They long ago entered to their programs the development of nuclear energy, their building capacity, and China is doing it fast. India is catching up. Our Bengalese friends are saying that 2 units in one station are not enough, so we're building 2 units more. So I don't think that they care much whether Brussels is going to add nuclear energy to the green taxonomy. We understand that we have the carbon tax, and they'll engage with the European suppliers, but they cannot envisage the development of their power systems without nuclear power. And this is true for the Central Asian countries as well. And all those who have this dynamic economy development, those who develop consumption, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and others, they're discussing this seriously at the national elite level. They're not talking whether this is needed or not. They're talking about where and when to build this and what kind of capacity. And the nuclear power plant works for 60 to 100 years. So we should look at this with a long time horizon. The second thing, the nuclear power plant is, say, 2 to 3% dependable on the raw materials in terms of power generation. And if uranium becomes 5 times more expensive in the next 20 years, the power consumer is hardly going to fill it. Well, and if gas and coal were going to become 5 times more expensive, well, you understand what it means. So the economy of the NPP is attractive, but there is an important condition to it. The political wisdom and boldness should be there, so that the political leadership should look at the long term. When they stop thinking within one presidential term, the country quickly decides to build a nuclear power plant. Well, I'm confident we don't have any alternative to support the development of the technological progress. So without nuclear power, this is not possible. It's not only for power generation, this is for traffic, for exploring the far space, and radio medicine, and understanding the matter, determining the fundamental development laws in nature, because the picture we have in our mind now, I mean the protons, neutrons, and electrons, this picture dates back to the early The new physics is about a deeper understanding of matter, and without nuclear technology, you will not obtain this.
Well, speaking of the new picture, the green future, an ideal green future, is it utopian to expect it? You know, I was thinking it's like a patient coming to a doctor, the diagnosis is known, we know how to treat you. And then the doctor goes on, oh, but you need to understand, any medical intervention has its adverse effects. So does the green future have any such adverse effects? Or it can be 100% perfect?
We can be even more cynical here. We have a joke, you know, of the 1990s. A rich man comes back from seeing his doctor, saying, oh, it's so horrible, I'm diagnosed now, I cannot have anything fat or hot, I cannot drink, so how are we going to live? He said, well, I had to pay 2,000 rubles, and now I'm allowed to do all this. Well, in this regard, well, we don't have to pay 2,000 rubles to be allowed to do this, because we'll have to pay even more dearly for everything. I would say that, you know, this is a huge commitment and a challenge for the global elite and the leadership of individual countries. Well, we need to establish these programs. We are talking about the 50s and 60s. I mean, the big countries, say the United States, or Australia, they haven't signed the coal declaration at COP26. Why so? Well, you know, this estimate to replace the capacity, this scrupulous positioning of generating capacity throughout our huge countries, connecting this with the consumer without shifting this economic burden to the population and the entrepreneurs. All of this implies huge economic programs and a lot of public investment for dozens of years. And this is exactly the side effect which should be there. So we should have a real fundamental estimate for the programs for dozens of years ahead, how the generation will change, how the approaches of traffic will change. I mean, vehicle traffic and diesel traffic, including the sea transportation. We can see the change in the large industrial production facilities because they emit even more than power generation. So, in a way, well, this recipe, as you are mentioning, these recommendations or the treatment program, it should go for dozens of years. And there'll be some side effects to it. The side effects will be the load on the budget, on the public budget. This will be solving the social issues in the industries and in the power generation, and they should reduce their capacities somewhere, and these people should understand that they are not left behind. These people should take part in other industries, and these cities and facilities should be refocused on other goals, and all of that is doable. Well, this will happen sooner or later, and the sooner we do it, the more effective and the cheaper we'll be able to do it. You know, the challenge related to the climate agenda is not completely understood yet. We can hardly understand many of the processes going on. Let me share with you a basic example. Rosatom is the operator of the Northern Sea route. We build nuclear icebreakers, and this is quite challenging in terms of how much we should spend, how quickly we should build it. And some colleagues have recently, within the last 2 years, have told us that, well, Rosatom shouldn't have been telling these scary stories about the big fleet of icebreakers. We are getting warmer, 5 degrees plus, the ice doesn't go there, and so on and so forth. Okay. We can see this trend, but this is done one of a dozen trends. There is another trend. The Siberian fires of this year impacted the Arctic atmosphere a lot, and the sun couldn't penetrate this, and they couldn't heat the Arctic enough in the summer. And the winter came 3 weeks sooner to the Arctic this year. No one could predict this. Well, they should have, because this is a two-move technological estimate. Okay, fire, heat, fire, fire, smoke, no heat, quick winter. And now 14 ships are being rescued by us. So each of these aspects related to the climate and the change in temperature, all these things have a lot of nuances and subtleties. And the technological framework we need in the energy, in transportation, in power generation, and in the industry, well, I believe this framework is not clearly understood by any of the countries. Well, I believe that the COP is there to come to terms on the framework idea and the stages, because, well, you cannot build it in one country. You cannot have a good future in one country. You cannot cover a country with a dome.
Well, we'll talk about this whole in it together thing, because it's indeed the most important factor, and everyone has to be united around this common goal. But before that, please give me some more specifics. We keep talking of sustainable green development, and I hope you don't take offense now. I do realize you're deeply in it, it drives you, but this phrase, sustainable development, it is so trite, so overused. So, you know, it's getting devalued, what it means anyway. So please let me ask you what it means to you to do business sustainably. It's just that there is this feeling that all too many corporations and institutions do it because it's good manners, because it's good for PR, for your image. No guarantee they're all for the planet and its future. What it means to do the business sustainably.
Well, I risk annoying somehow the authors of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which is the Bible, the global Bible. And I can irritate the rating agencies who check how sustainable we are, and the activists can be irritated as well, because I have a completely different perspective of this. For me, sustainability is about setting for a corporation, in our case, or in a city, where we are a core company, well, setting the human being in the center of our activity. So this is the essence. You should build all your activities around the human being. And if my KPIs, for some reason, say the economic ones, or any others, if they should harm the human being, this means that the KPIs are...
Human being is most valuable.
Sure, and this is not about payroll. This is much deeper. Well, payroll is important, the environment where they live, ecology and so on. And apart from these physical things, what I eat, what I drink, what I breathe, oh, this is important. And the mental health and the understanding that the people are in demand is important. I should do my best for the corporate tools to refrain from pressing the people into these square-headed officials. We should bring all the best from them. So the excitement, the science capabilities, or the social issues, because our social agenda is huge for the country and
To resolve it, we do need all the generations to act together on these challenges. The new energy, the climate, combating inequality, and on and on and on. We are in it together. But then again, the Greta Thunberg generation, modern leaders welcome her, at least they make believe they do. They meet her, 2 weeks of discussions, speeches, all that. And then she, I mean, the face of the generation, so to speak, she looks at them and says, "You're nothing but a forum of hypocrites. How would I trust you? You ruined the world I live in, and now I have to repair it." That's my point, see? Seems like the generations, the 20-somethings, the conscious generation, they feel like the previous generation left them with so many grave problems, and now they are the ones to clean up. So, to the extent that the trust, much-needed trust, that should let us together, it's difficult to get.
Thank you. This is a good question. I can agree to an extent. Indeed. The 1940s and 50s generation developing the nuclear project left some issues behind. In the 50s, 60s, those who were building their power energy in the Soviet Union, in Western in Eastern Europe, they left some other issues like Chernobyl. Our generation is leaving behind some other issues because we had to develop the country quickly. We had to catch up, and especially between the hammer and the hard place of sanctions. So we had to develop the industry, the agriculture, the digital technology. We had to do it. Otherwise, our sovereignty would have been undermined. Every generation leaves issues behind. But if I start cursing those who developed the nuclear project, this would be the last day and last minute of me being employed, not only in the industry, but in general. We should say thank you for this, because they gave us knowledge and technology. Sure. On the other hand, some issues to be solved were added to the backlog. The same is the connection between us and the next generation. Most of us are good and honest people who are serving the motherland. So you should believe it or not. If you don't believe it, it doesn't make any sense discussing it. And if you believe it, I believe that most of people believe in it, we should be jointly looking for these solutions, because the generation of the young are not going to solve all the problems. They have some things behind. And the next kids can challenge the current 20-year-olds, say in 30 years. They can say, why is the planet so dirty? So this is the approach, the fabula thing. So if there's a generation gap in terms of the way of life, so we understand that you are one family, for instance, as you put it. Okay, if we are one family, then we have the same things and the same worries and the same tasks. And we should do as much as we can to reduce this negative legacy. So then the next generation should take this racing one from us and continue. So our task, the way I see it, is to engage these guys into this work as soon as possible. That's why we're not only dealing with the youth, we are dealing with the school children and university children. And I hope that most of the people, be it in the private business, in science, in academia, in public operations service, in public service, I hope that people will follow this line of working for the human beings, irrespective of your location or position, and improving your country and nature. Hopefully this will continue. I believe this is the most important challenge of us as today's leaders. We should do as much as we can in terms of the budget restraints and technology and the situation. We should do our best to make our planet healthier, to make our country more healthier, to make our organizations more healthier. And for this, we should engage the youth as much as we can to invite them to be active in solving the problems today. They will correct us, and they'll be more competent when they...
You are the partner of the Global Impact Conference, and a couple of days ago I was interviewing young people, the international community, and our young men and women, and the innovators all charged by the topic of green energy. And we talked a lot about trust between generations. And this one guy put it really nicely. He said, thing is, for us to trust the older generation, because now we don't really trust them, for us to trust them, we need to make friends with them, and they with us. Because when you're friends with someone, you may have opposite points of view. You may not accept it, but you respect it, and you try to really get it, the other point of view. And that's the basis for you two doing something together. I love this idea of friendship, but wanting to become friends, not like you have to understand and you have to accept the other's point of view. Be friends. Great idea.
Absolutely. I'd like to support you in this. I establish my relationships and the team I work for, and internationally, irrespective of the tightness of the agenda, I always try to understand and to appreciate.
So let's circle back to where we started. You know, the humanity is faced with unprecedented challenges. Not imaginary, not made up, nothing to do with ideology differences, the real challenges, the physical threats that loom over us. So there is a feeling that it has to do with all of us, and we can only manage it together as a planet rather than individually, like me, Sofik, or Alexey, or indeed Russia, Georgia, America, together. Yet it doesn't happen. The pandemic illustrates just what I mean. If we were to come as one, make a joint effort to create a vaccine, the medicines, common rules, never happened. So So it is with everything, the global warming, the irresponsible consumption of the new technologies, the inequality, inequity. We need to be together, but we're not. And this feeling of total distrust, global distrust, I do hope you have something to tell me how to overcome it. Because unless we join our efforts and do it together as citizens of the world, as citizens of the world, not respective countries, we won't pull it off.
Well, it's really important. Absolutely. Strange as it might seem, the global challenges, the ecology and the pandemic, is not pushing people together. We are not united in the face of bad times, which should happen, logically speaking. And everybody here has his or her own commitment. The president, the head of government, all of them have their own commitment. And I have a commitment as a human being, and the public operations have these commitments. What shall we do? We shall be open as far as we can in discussing these things, hear people, exchange things with people, and promote this trust. We don't have any trust formula. Step 1, step 2, step 3. No. You can trust, and you can believe only based on all the factors and characteristics and features. All of this comes together, and I believe that, well, our technology development commitment, the way we have it, was also in the field of developing trust. Well, we are at the beginning of the journey. I don't know the specific actions and the specific shape of this to take place, but I know that our goal is honest. It's not invented, and it's not on my KPI list. I understand that the risk looming over the planet is fatal. It's really there in terms of, well, the big global natural changes. The roots and the reasons are not yet really understood. I mean, the fundamental ones. This means we don't have a precise framework over it, and dealing with this risk is possible only at a different trust level. And just like in any discussion, well, for instance, if you want to establish relationships, well, what should you start with? Well, you should tell them about yourself. You should tell them about your plans. You should invite the person to implement your plans and show that my plans coincide in a way with your plans, well, at least in terms of values. And if our values and goals coincide, maybe we can adjust and align the plans. So this is my understanding of this action chain. So we should show that indeed we live on one planet, breathe one air, have the same goals and tasks, and we are going to do things to improve our life, to solve the challenges. And I believe you have the same goals. So maybe your plans are different. Okay, let's exchange the plans, let's adjust them. And so we move step by step. And so we do it whether we want it or whether we can it or not. So we should move forward together. And the role of leadership is really important here. This is the most difficult thing, to be the first to take the step ahead and to ask for this trust and to offer yourself, to offer your organization, in this case, to build this trust. But I believe that, indeed, this is a kind of commitment.
Alexey, I wish you all the best in all your endeavors. Thank you so very much.